So thank you, Ida, first of all, for organizing this and for hosting the group and bringing us together, Tamera and NGL. And I'm really happy that we have this moment now. I've known about Miki and her work for some years now, and the last time I heard about her before she came and I really decided to look into it was actually when I heard from friends at Extinction Rebellion that she was asked together with NGL to consult with the internal communication problems that the movement was facing. And I will just say a few words, what I know about you, and then tell us what the intention for this evening is. So Miki Kashtan is an internationally renowned author, speaker, mediator, and actually she is also a visionary, a futurist, and the more I learn about her work, a quite radical systems thinker. And I appreciate especially that part. And part of her work is, or a strong part is, the exploration of how do we shift from, and we'll talk about this, a power over paradigm to a power with paradigm, and how can organizations shift from traditional ways of governance, organization, management that are framed in this power over paradigm to ways of governance, management, organization that are shaped by a power with paradigm. Another term that is being used is also self-management. But this is not just in the framework of management itself, but really in the vision, in service of a big vision for global system change that we will also come to talk about. And a formulation that the NGL group used in their presentation last time was, I quote right, a world where attending to everyone's needs is the organizing principle. Yeah. And so we would like to dedicate this evening to this question: how do we shift from power over to power with? What does it look like on a global level, but also how does it look like in the way how a community, an organization really organizes itself? And I will make some questions and hope that in the end we will have time for interaction. And I will also pick up this line that Ida just brought about different languages, and also tie it into the sentence, a world where attending everyone's need is the organizing principle. Because in the previous conversations that we had, actually when you talked about economics, I felt you came closest to what we in Tamera refer to as the sacred matrix. So the inherent organizing force of the universe that is oriented towards synergy, trust, cooperation. And you talk about a mothering principle, that life is organized, actually functions according to a mothering principle. And you have quite a radical view on gift as a key of economy, and I would actually like you to start with that. What do you mean? What is your vision of economy, but also how do you live it in your own life?
Yes, like everything in 5 minutes, yes.
Exactly.
So, I want to, before answering the question, I just want to come into the space and not just like be an answering questions machine, and say that it's very moving for me to be sitting here, because it's very rare that I get to talk to fellow visionaries and not to people who are waiting for some vision to arise from someplace else. So it feels quite amazing to be sitting here with so many people who are in that. I was telling Martin, the way, in terms of their relationship, in the moment it feels to me like we are two trunks within the same tree. And maybe it's even closer. We might still discover that it's closer, but at least that. We are part of the same project. And we have different language, different methods, different areas of focus, but it's the same project. And so given who you are, I can tell you of a particular moment in which language came to me, and it felt like it came from Gaia. I was in Chile, in a place called Punto Cero, which means point zero, which is right where the struggles for liberation from the Spaniards started in Chile. And the place was built according to indigenous principles, so there was no straight line there. There wasn't like a trail that went from the kitchen to the hall that was straight. It was all meandery, so you couldn't just be linear. And I was in that place. It's the first time that I actually felt connection with Gaia as a living entity. And that's where this line came to me, that life is organized to care for all that lives through an endless flow of energy and resources. And that we humans, since the dawn of patriarchy, and we may or may not get to the historical thing, but let's just leave it that we all know that patriarchy is an event and not part of human nature. It's an event that has a before and after. Not the same time in different places, but it's always been an event. With that, we exited that flow. And we exited it through two mechanisms that are built into how we function now. One of them is accumulation, and the other is exchange. Sorry, I'm going to turn a little bit in a slightly different direction so we can see everyone. It's very easy to see how accumulation interferes with flow, because a lot of indigenous cultures have the same principle that basically says when everyone takes only what they need, not more, and also not less, there's going to be enough. Because if you take less than what you need, you're not giving enough information to life about how much needs to be produced. And when we lost trust in life, then it became first scarcity, which for me is what patriarchy emerges from, is scarcity. And then we want to take more than we need and accumulate. It's very easy to see that in a system that is closed, the only input that we have into our system is sun. Everything else is closed. Within a closed system, if somebody takes more than they need, there's going to be less in circulation for everyone else. It's really simple. That's why I loved it when somebody said, it was just in a private email, and I don't remember who it was, but I love what he said. He said, we do not have to attend to extreme poverty. All we have to do is attend to extreme wealth. Extreme poverty will take care of itself. So that part is easy because it takes it out of circulation, but it's much harder for people to see why exchange interferes with flow and why gifting is necessary. Because in theory, you can do exchange and not accumulate. But what happens in exchange is I give to you, you give to me, and they cancel each other. There isn't actually flow in the system that takes the energy that you got from me, the wisdom, the life energy that is in it, not just the thing, and you pass it on to someone else. And I take and then that someone passes it to someone else, it comes to me, but not from you. It comes to me from life. So it both takes away trust and takes away information that could flow in the system. It also goes anti-relationship. Because we cancel it and then we don't need to relate. Whereas if I give you, it keeps us in relationship. The way it relates to mothering, and I want to credit two people that if you don't know about them here in Tamera, I will invite you to think about them. One is Genevieve Vaughn, and the book that may be relevant is The Maternal Roots of the Gift Economy. And her thesis is that we are a mothering species. And what that means is not that we are all mothers, but that mothering is an other orientation, an orientation to needs as they present themselves. And that before patriarchy, we all did that. Not just women who were mothers. Everyone was oriented towards the needs. We are the species with the longest period of dependence. And that is not accidental. There are evolutionary reasons, and that brings the other person, who is Umberto Maturana. And the particular book that I would recommend is The Origins of Humanness in the Biology of Love. That's become a little bit like a mini Bible for some of us in NGO. And
could you repeat that title, Miki?
yes, The Origins of Humanness in the Biology of Love. When I read that title, I fell in love. Just this idea, the biology of love. And so the two strands complement each other. Our extended childhood makes us dependent on love. And I just want to say, for me, love doesn't automatically at all relate to sexuality. I see them as two separate strands. This is one of the places where it's slightly different project. So I am here emphasizing love as an orientation of care, as an orientation of commitment, consideration, holding others' needs. That is necessary for our survival, not just as children. We have evolved, as Maturana says, to such a degree into love that although we are capable of not acting in love, we suffer when it's not there. And that is part of his understanding of why things are the way they are now. So the gifting is the unilateral orientation to respond to others' needs. And this puts an immense responsibility on us to make our needs known. If you remember when I said not taking less than we need. If we don't make our needs known, if we don't make requests, there isn't going to be enough information in the system to bring us what we need. So that's kind of enough about gift. And you asked,
how do you live it?
How do I live it? And in this period, in the last several months, the word I is starting to lose meaning as we become a we. And the particular methodology of becoming a we is binding our fortunes, resources, and decision-making together. That's what that means. So I'm just trying to think of an example. We haven't yet brought all our resources together because we are still in an experimental phase. But still the question arises, one of us receives money, let's say a relative dies and one of us receives money. What happens to that money and who decides? Does it belong to that person or is it all of ours to decide? Those questions change what happens. It almost doesn't matter how you decide or what the end result is, but the fact that the questions are asked changes the energy field. There's countless examples. All the time we are moving closer and closer to a kind of togetherness that I always intuited. It's like Emma says it's like in our cellular memory, because that's how we come to the world, expecting it. So I always had the intuition, and it's the first time in my life that I experience it. And even before this, for several years, I've been moving more and more of my work to be on a gift basis. And conscious of the fact that we are out of flow, I consciously seed it in such a way that I give more than comes. It's like planting the seeds and trusting that it will flow. And I'm fine if it means there isn't going to be enough. I would rather live in trust and be burned than live in fear all the time. Yeah. I remember one day I was walking in the farmer's market, which is one of the things I miss from the Bay Area. It's year-round, fresh, lovely, local, organic produce. And someone said to me, hey, you have money that might fall out of your pocket. You might want to put it inside, and besides, maybe you want to put it in a wallet and not put it in your pocket. And that's when I articulated this. I would rather have it fall out of my pocket or someone take it than feel like I need to protect it. My only exception to this is my computer. It's like the loss that I would have from not having it is just like too much. So I have a rule, I never leave it unattended in a car. And so it's never been stolen yet. Is this enough of an answer?
Great, yeah. I mean, I feel we could spend the rest of the hour or 3 days about that.
Yes.
But as the intention is to, like, in a way cover some of your work, I will move from there. But thank you so much. Yeah, I would like to ask you now to speak about these two terms of this power over paradigm and the power with paradigm. Maybe you can also speak a little bit about who this terminology is coming from, and how do they differ?
So this is one of those things. I'm just going to make a quiz. And NGL people, don't raise your hand because you already know. How many of you have heard of Mary Parker Follett? Okay, that's lovely. How many of you have heard of power over and power with? Okay, now sit and take this in. Here's another woman that has disappeared from history because of the way that patriarchy functions. Mary Parker Follett is the person who came up with this distinction. And yet we know the terms, we don't know about her. She did massive research on the dynamics of how people function in groups and how people can reach integrative outcomes. And she says, I'm not going to have it totally verbatim. She says there are 3 ways to work with differences: domination, compromise, or integration. In domination, one side gets what they want. In compromise, no one gets what they want. In integration, there is a possibility that everybody gets what they wish for. That's deep. And she says that compromise is quantitative and integration is qualitative. And that also is deep. Compromise is within the either-or paradigm. It's like there is something that we're trying to divide between us. And we are arm wrestling, how much you will get and how much I will get. And in compromise, we find some way of dividing it where neither one of us feels too cheated. But in integration, it's qualitative. We transcend the terms of the difference and come up with a solution that includes both of us. That is the most exciting manifestation of power with. So power over for me is a very deep manifestation of the 3 pillars of patriarchy as I see them. So I say that patriarchy emerges from scarcity, functions in separation, and results in powerlessness. As compared to life that emerges from flow, functions in togetherness, and results in choice. Which is interesting because we tend to think of choice as something that we assert in separation from some togetherness. And one of the things that we are trying to do is kind of like regrooving choice to be within togetherness. And so, how is power over related to scarcity, separation, and powerlessness? It's a very odd and paradoxical thing, but if you feel powerful, you don't need to exert your power over other people. You just don't feel the need. It's so simple that sometimes I just pause to take it in on a deeper level, just from how simple it is. Similarly, if we feel fully within our power, we're not likely to be angry, we're not likely to oppress, to manipulate, to do all the things that we do within a society that thwarts our needs to such an extent that there is no way for us to care for ourselves except at cost to others. And those of us who don't want to care for ourselves at cost to others end up not caring for ourselves at all. And then there's resentment, and then there is the eruption, and there's this odd phenomenon that I've tracked for a long time, where if you have like a serial killer or something like this, often you hear the neighbors saying, "I can't believe this person is the one who did it. They were such a nice person." That's an interesting, odd relationship. So that's about power, about loss of power, loss of choice. If I really experience togetherness with you, how could I ever possibly impose anything on you? It's only if you are somewhat other that it's even possible for my humanness to imagine doing something that doesn't work for you. And scarcity is what drives the whole thing to begin with, because the fundamental mistrust in life is about there being enough for all of us. And if there isn't enough for all of us, and we're separate from each other, and we don't have the power to make things happen, the only thing to do is to give up or oppress. That's the power over paradigm. So oddly enough, even when we give up, when we're nice or all of these things, we're actually still within the power over paradigm. Because the power over paradigm is not about I oppress others, it's about somebody has to oppress and everybody else has to submit.
That's a very important point. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that I feel deeply sorrowful about is that this isn't sufficiently questioned in social movements. So a lot of the social movements are against. They're against patriarchy, against racism, against injustice, against patriarchy, against whatever. And in all this againstness, you're still not trying to integrate. You're still fighting, you're still opposed, you still don't see that there's a possibility of understanding what is going on, what is driving the behavior that is frightening to us, and what is a way to care for the person who engages in such behavior, to bring them back into flow rather than to switch who is in power.
Yeah.
So,
Last night we had a evening here speaking about the Zapatistas, where it was exactly about that shift, not trying to take control of the state, but rather embody a different paradigm. So
it reminds me of a really beautiful example that I heard about Rojava, which is a similar thing, where they have, so I think you probably know, because I think you're connected to Rojava, that everything has one man and one woman. But we heard from someone who was there that there are regions in which women are not allowed to participate politically. And they had the problem of what to do with those regions. And they came up with an ingenious solution for me. They said, it's fine, you don't have to bring women if you don't want to. But then you can only bring one person from your region, not two. And this is a way of creating an organic pull by keeping that void open and like a sore spot. It puts pressure on those other people, but the pressure comes from life, not from imposition. We were talking about interaction, so I would like to hear just from one or two people what is arising in you as you're hearing this conversation, and do you have anything you want to add or ask? This is genuine.
I mean, what arises in me is like a sense of awe and wonder about how you can speak these principles of life that I
without working in a garden. Without working in a garden.
Yeah, this I would come to later.
Feedback will still come.
For now, I want to appreciate this for what it is, has been spoken here. But I had this thought also in my mind with the garden. It's good that you mentioned it. To become like whole, we need a lot of things, and also good thinking. And I'm grateful for like these connections and inspirations of how to live. Yeah.
This question of garden ties to a very, very deep principle that is one of the things that we live with. We've talked about it with some people, is the principle of doing only that which is within capacity.
Only what?
Only that which is within capacity. Yeah. So, and related to that is thinking about where there is redundant capacity and where there is non-redundant capacity. It's a very difficult thing to hold with complete reverence for everything.
Can you maybe say this in simpler words for the non-native?
Yeah. Yes. So, I'm just trying to think of specific examples. So I write super easily. It just flows out of me much of the time. And I write with clarity and depth and precision that people really appreciate and they can learn from it. That's non-redundant capacity. It's not like I can stop doing the writing and somebody else from the group can pick it up. And is that clear enough as an example? And it's a very difficult principle. When it's a principle that says that it makes sense for resources to flow, to nurture where there is non-redundant capacity. That means I won't go to the garden, personally. Because when I go to the garden, I can't write. Or I will go to the garden enough to learn something, to write about it, but not more than that. And it's difficult because it edges on the special person, but it's not how I see it. It's also people who have special sensitivities, like some of us in the group have more sensitivity than others, and they end up de facto receiving more care. And that is fine. We do not strive for equality. Equality for me still is based within scarcity. We have to divide it. But if you really, really think deeply about what are the needs and what are the capacities, where are the resources, where is their willingness, what are the impacts, you exit the world of moralizing and you're in the world of phenomena and information and what is possible given our super limited resources. In the last few weeks, I've started talking about our species as being low capacity. All of humanity is low capacity. That means we need to learn what we are really, really grappling with is, I call it capacity bootstrapping. How do we use the little capacity that exists as intelligently as possible so that it builds more capacity? Instead of using it by stretching it and depleting us. That one we are very used to. I've done it for decades, and it's perhaps in part because of my age that it's like over. I'm 65. I'm not going to have more energy than I have now, only less. And so how do I use that energy intelligently to build capacity? So Eddie, for example, is now the point person of a project. He doesn't know it quite yet, but I think he does. The project is called Download What Miki Does. So we can embed it systemically, and it doesn't depend on me. See, that's why I'm saying a leader and not the leader. Because if I am the leader, the moment I die, the project is gone. And it's a big aim of the project to outlive me. Probably said more than you bargained for, but yeah. Anyone else?
I like what you coined, but I won't be able to say it, so I would ask you to say it again. Where patriarchy is born from scarcity.
Yeah.
Could you say it again? Because I couldn't
Yeah.
grasp it.
Patriarchy emerges from scarcity, functions in separation, and results in powerlessness. Life emerges from flow, functions in togetherness, and results in choice. There was a moment a few months ago when Emma and I were driving somewhere, and there were two ravens on the roadside, and I suddenly got connected with how free they were. Completely free. Free in ways that humans have been totally domesticated out of. And also simultaneously how enormous the vulnerability of that freedom. Any moment some predator may come, any moment they won't have enough to eat, they will trip on something, fall, die. We have been unwilling to accept that vulnerability, and the result is that we've given up on our freedom.
Shall I make another question?
Sure. We can go on like this
Are you
indefinitely.
the one?
I mean, I have a question because it's the second time you mentioned choice
Choice?
with this other view on it, and something around compassion, heart, love comes to me when I hear your version of it. And I had the question if you can go a little bit deeper in how you see choice.
Yeah. In simple terms, the deepest choice I want to have is to be fully aware of the flow of life within me, and which shows up in what are my needs, what am I feeling, what am I intuiting, what am I imagining, whatever comes from within, in the context of the larger whole. It's really that simple. Most of what we do is not done in conscious choice. I'm not speaking about Tamerans, because you work on these things, but overall, in our modern societies, when we do something, it comes from should, impulse, habit, obligation, fear, desire for reward, shame, all of these things, but not from, this is the flow in me, and how does it fit in the larger whole, and therefore how do I move? That is for me choice. That is how I want to live. Did that answer you?
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Good. My next question is a big one.
Oh, the other ones were so small.
Yeah, I know. But that one is a real big one. So you started to speak about the power over and the power with paradigms, and you speak about 5 core systems that are present in social organizations or social organisms. And you say that unless they are consciously designed, they will be inherited. And I would like you to explain that sentence and also tell us what these 5 systems are. And thirdly, what it looks like in the power over and what it looks like in the power with.
Sure.
So
I want to start with 2 examples of what I mean about the systems will be inherited.
yeah.
One is from the kibbutz movement in Israel, which I imagine that Tamera can see itself, as a kind of like a super distant cousin of some of the things that people were experimenting with. Now, they talked about economic equality, and they talked about what they called sexual equality. We wouldn't call it that exactly now, but we all know what that means. They institutionalized economic equality. They didn't institutionalize sexual equality. They only talked about it. The moment the children came, sexual division of labor reasserted itself. And there were also larger economic decisions that intensified it. Because ultimately, although the kibbutz was trying to be a collective, I think of it more as a collective entrepreneur rather than as a self-reliant organism that tries to live within itself. So all the kibbutzim were competing in the market against non-kibbutz players, but they were a player in the market. There was a choice made in the early days of going for crops rather than horticulture. Horticulture is vegetables, the garden, and all of that. Horticulture allows women to be with their children. So even while breastfeeding, you can bring your child to where the vegetables are grown, put the child in a basket, take turns, do all kinds of things, but still participate. When you do crops, it's fields, it's outside, you have to drive there. The women can no longer participate. So the 2 things intensify themselves. It wasn't institutionalized, they inherited the thing from the culture. So much so that some people are using the kibbutz as proof that the division of labor between the sexes is natural. Because see, the women had a choice, but they chose this. That's one example. Another example is most people in the so-called progressive world will say that they believe in restorative justice rather than in retributive justice, right? Most people will say it's the cool thing to say. But then a friend does something that you disapprove of, and you cut them off. What is that if not retributive justice? We
Can
talk.
define the terms?
Hmm?
The terms in other words?
Restorative justice is based on the idea that if there's conflict or harm, you need to restore the trust that was destroyed, restore the relationships, and ultimately learn from it for the future. Retributive justice is punitive justice. You did something bad, now you're going to get punished. That's how the criminal justice system of, I think, all the countries in the world functions. There are pockets of restorative justice that are growing, but the general systems are punitive, retributive. And so if we don't have good enough agreements about how we do conflict or about how we do the economy, we will reproduce what happens in society. That is what that principle says. Now, the 5 systems exist. It's not like if we don't talk about them, they don't exist. It's there 5 different functions that every living thing requires.
So what are they?
There's decision making. Every living being, and that includes each of us as a unitary biological system. We need to know how we make decisions. A group like Tamera needs to know how you make decisions. If you don't know how you make decisions, you will default to the cultures that you come from. And my guess is that you come from a mixture, an unthought through mixture, not because I know you, but because that's what it is in the quote-unquote progressive world. It's an unworked out, uneasy relationship between some version of top-down leadership decides and some version of consensus everybody participates. Both of these have so many problems that people get stuck in them. So that every system, every living being, whether it's a microbe or total humanity, makes decisions that how that is going to happen, because we are non-instinctual creatures. In other words, it's not like we don't have instincts, but we don't function primarily based on instincts. We need to learn how to do these things. If we don't learn them consciously, we will learn them through internalization. The second one is, I think it might be more efficient if I say for each of them where I see the shift. So the shift for decision making is from either or to integration. And we kind of already talked about it, so I don't think I need to say much more about it unless we decide to enter more into that. But given the rhythm that I heard here, it looks like that is a very, very rich vein of exploration here. It's how to make decisions. Second is resource flow. How does it happen that resources flow? Where do they come from? Where do they go? And how does that happen? Our current systems in the world send the resources from the many to the few. That's how it operates, through exchange and accumulation. Here, the shift is from incentive, which is based on a terrible view of human nature, a view that I don't believe that Tamerans share, of humans as fundamentally self-centered and uncaring. But you can have that view and still continue to function in exchange if you don't consciously think about how you want to structure resources. So the way we structure resources is based on a principle of willingness, which basically says that resources flow from where they exist to where they are needed, based on willingness within capacity, and within purpose. It's a dense principle, but fundamentally it means nobody does something they're not willing to do. Resources are not evenly distributed. They're distributed based on need. You're trying to minimize negative impacts. You're not trying to equalize things. It's this, I think, is the hardest transformation of all, because it speaks to the scarcity from within which emerged patriarchy. So it's going to be the hardest to change. You know, I've often asked people, why is it that a doctor receives 10 times more than a woman who cleans houses per hour? Why? There's no reason. Their needs are the same. They both need to eat. They both need to sleep. Why is it distributed like this? And people have an exquisitely difficult time releasing the deep groove of the doctor deserves it because the doctor went to school. Deserving doesn't exist in life. It only exists in human imagination. Even saying something tame, like, I am so glad you finally have the love that you deserve, implies within it that somebody else doesn't deserve to have love. Yeah.
And that you're entitled to it.
Yeah. I would rather say, I'm so glad you have the love that you're longing for. Period. Yeah, so that's incentive to willingness. The third is information flow, which is how does information flow within the ecosystem of whatever whatever the living being is. Who finds out about what? In conventional patriarchal power over institutions, information flows based on control, on an as needed basis. So mostly information is guarded. And the shift here is towards transparency. As much transparency is at all possible. Because otherwise the people at the top don't want to say things to the people at the bottom and reinforce the idea that the people at the bottom make stupid decisions. Of course people make stupid decisions. If they don't have the larger picture and the information and what is held by management, how could they possibly make a wise decision? And people at the bottom don't give information to the people at the top because they're afraid of retaliation. So information is clogged and doesn't flow, and is not available for all other systems to utilize. And then you have feedback flow, where the shift is from performance to learning. Because existing feedback systems within organizations, to the extent that they happen, are based on reward and punishment, compliance, do better at your job. They're not based on the principle of learning. And in life, feedback is about learning. There's constant flow of feedback through which you learn how to function better, how to function better, how to function better. If you block feedback, learning won't happen and you will keep making the same mistake. Also, feedback that doesn't flow creates conflict. Conflict is a systemic thing, it's not an interpersonal thing. I'll say it again.
Yeah, maybe unpack that a little bit, yeah.
So I'll give an example. It's a very small example, but it was very telling. I was called into some startup where there was terrible conflict between the person who was responsible for product development and the person who was responsible for IT. I don't remember what their titles were. Now, because this was a high-tech company, you can see that product development and IT can be pretty blurry. And there was terrible conflict between those two people, and the CEO was beside himself. Like, he loved them both, he didn't want to lose either of them, and he couldn't see a way for them to work together. So I came in, I interviewed each of them for half an hour, and it was clear to me what the problem was. And it was within the decision-making system. There was this whole blurry area where each of the two teams thought that they had the authority to make decisions. So they were stepping on each other's toes all the time. I know this sounds like a magic wand, but it really was like that. I then sat with the two of them for an hour. We worked out the agreement, which was so simple, it's embarrassing. The agreement was that once a week, a member from each of the teams sits together with the CEO, and they make together decisions that are within the overlapping area. The last time I heard from them was 2 years later, no further conflict between those two people. Now, what happens is that although the origin is systemic, it's basically conflict is what the system cannot handle. Doesn't have capacity to handle. And if you think about it, as our capacity decreases, smaller and smaller problems will show up as conflict. As our capacity increases, we can metabolize bigger and bigger problems without creating conflict. And so it's a capacity issue. It's not a consequences issue. But once conflict arises, it will tend to arise between specific individuals. And so you need to attend to the trust, usually attend to the trust, before you solve the operational problem that is the deeper root of it. I know this is a very different theory of conflict from one that you have here, but it is the one that I work with, yeah.
Yeah, I think we could now start to have more conversation and explore also the overlap of the two, which I think would be a very interesting exploration.
Yeah.
But I think for now it's also just your stage to unfold your thinking.
And there's one more thing, which is that we have been working on developing an actual approach to how to develop a conflict system that is based on capacity and liberation, rather than on how to resolve the conflict. And the idea of the system is, when there's conflict, how do we increase capacity? If conflict is a manifestation of low capacity, what can we do to increase capacity? And the basic principle of the system is that every person checks. It's like we have literally a flow chart, and through the flow chart you see where you possibly can add capacity to the conflict field. It's embryonic. We haven't done enough experimenting to have enough feedback to know what it is, but it's super exciting to us. So that's
Thank you.
Answer to that question.
I wonder a little bit how you're doing.
And it's the fifth
Yes,
one.
the fifth.
Conflict is the fifth one.
Ah.
So it's decision making, resource flow, information flow, feedback flow, and conflict engagement. We don't call it conflict resolution because we're not assuming that the purpose of conflict is to be resolved. So it's to find out what is the best way to attend to all the needs present. And sometimes it's to say goodbye. As you all know, that is what happened for us. It's not easy and it's not happy, but it is the best that we were able to do, is to decide that being together was not right. So the conflict is entirely not resolved, but we engaged with it as much as we had capacity. And that is deep humility, to recognize the limits of your capacity and do no more than what you're actually capable of doing, because overstretching is not going to get us the revolution we want. You want to do one more?
Yeah. I mean, now have an internal conflict. I mean, I feel really tempted to go deeper into the decision making. I also would like to explore this whole area of global vision and governance.
My suggestion is let's do that,
Yeah.
and let's schedule another time that isn't like an interview, but a time to engage with the community, with those who want to ask questions about decision making specifically. And then I think then we don't have to try to push something into this format. It looks like that works for people.
Great, yeah. Yeah, so that would be then my last question, because we went quite deep into these also organizational issues. Have actually developed a thought, a vision for how this could work on a global level, which I find quite amazing.
Yeah.
So maybe you could just give us an overview of it, and also maybe give examples where you see that work.
Yeah. So there is a principle that I think it exists in the EU. I'm not sure. It's the principle of subsidiarity. What a difficult word. It's a very kind of like fancy word, but it basically means push decisions as close to the local as possible. And that is one of the core principles of the
Anarchism. Sorry.
That I have over the years, I've had like a long line of anarchists who kind of like push on me and say, "Why don't you identify as an anarchist?"
I wasn't trying to insinuate. I was thinking this was the word you were looking for. I'm sorry.
I think I no longer remember what I was looking for before, but the way that this model of global governance emerged is, I think 5 different people sent me an announcement in 2017 that there was a competition done by some Swedish organization for a prize. It was $5 million prize for the best model of global governance that could attend to global challenges that, according to them and according to me, nation states and the UN are completely incapable of doing, totally incapable. And so I put together a group of people from around the world, and we put together something. I had the skeleton of it already years before, and it's in my book, Reweaving Our Human Fabric. It has that skeleton, but this was like really working it out. And we had the most intense principle that we held, related to all the things that we talk about in terms of power and all of that, was the principle that the model we came up with had to work for the most powerful and the least powerful. It's very easy to create something that works for the most powerful. We have it. I don't actually believe it really works for them, but it works for them on some kind of a narrow material level of comfort and ease and freedom and so-called liberties and all of that. It's also very easy to put on paper something that works for the least powerful, that the most powerful will instantly nix. So we really thought through what is it that we can do that, if presented to the powerful, they would actually see benefit in it. And so the model has 3 parts. One is, and in that sense I think it's different from anarchism, but anyway, we're not talking about that. So one part of it is the local to global, which is basically, it's kind of simple. So Tamera, let's say, has 150 people. That would mean that Tamera would have about 5 groups within it, 5, 6 groups within it, that I am imagining probably exist in terms, I know you have pods or something like this, I don't know. And each such group would make its own decisions about things that only impact them, for which they only need resources that exist within them, and for which all the knowledge and expertise are already within. It's very simple. If you're not going to impact anybody else, and you don't need anything from anybody else, there's no reason for that decision to go anywhere but where it is. Then there are decisions that might affect, other pods, but all still within Tamera. So each pod selects a representative that goes to a circle of several people, and that circle might also include people from outside Tamera. And that circle looks at decisions where the impacts, the resource flow and all of that affects all, 2 or more of the pods within it. Now, key is the representatives stay within their pods. Now this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing, they each select a representative. Eventually you have a global council. But that global council is made up of people, each one of which is within their own pod. So the question of accountability is addressed organically. Because if the local pod doesn't like what their representative does, no matter that the representative is in the global council, they recall their local representative and poof, they're no longer part of anything else. So it's completely locally owned all the way through. Now the poor person who is in the global council is going to do nothing in their life but be in meetings.
Right.
Because it's given the number of people that we have, the math of it makes it be about 10 levels.
Yeah.
So you're going to be in a lot of meetings. But that's fine. Because you won't have other responsibilities. Somebody said something, I also want to laugh. What was it?
It was anticlimax a bit.
I got it,
another
thank you.
solution than 3 meetings.
Yeah, we were looking for the salvation.
I think that is one of the reasons why somebody would be selected, is because they do well in meetings. And they don't mind being in a lot of meetings. And they know that they will be cared for in other ways. Being in meetings and doing everything else, that's not sustainable. Now this is for kind of like ongoing flow type decisions. Wow, I just got something that I want to say. It won't make sense to you, but I want my people to hear it because they will track it for us to talk about later. Which is that these are flow decisions. And then there is a mechanism for decision making and a mechanism for conflict, basically. I didn't see it until now. Don't worry about it. It's not affecting what I'm saying. So sometimes there are complex decisions that aren't just, how we're going to do the transportation, but suddenly there is, I don't know, climate change or different things that are complex that you need to study and investigate, collect information, hear from many people. That cannot be done in the usual mechanism. And then there are 2 other mechanisms where that is done, and this is where it gets to the most powerful and least powerful. One is through random sampling, sortitions. Random sampling from the population within which the impacts are contained. So if it's climate change, it would be a random sample of the entire global population. If it's a local flood, it will be within the region where the flood is. They come together and they make the decision. They can consult with whoever they need to consult. That is already in existence in the world. Such citizens' assemblies of different kinds are operating, and they are remarkably wise when they come together, because there's natural diversity that comes from the random sampling. Part of the problem of random sampling is that the powerful are so few that they're almost never going to be part of a random sample. So they will always feel excluded. So for this reason and for other reasons, there's also another mechanism, which is multi-stakeholder circles, where you actually bring people because of their relationship to the problem, not because they happen to be human. So climate change would not be solvable through random sampling, because the power holders would not legitimize it. And that's already happened. There have been climate-related citizens' assemblies that were then basically thrown out by the governments that solicited them. So my dream for this is to bring together CEOs of energy companies, climate scientists, climate deniers, climate activists, frontline communities, and bring them into a multi-stakeholder group where all the interests and the powers are represented. Now, if such a group makes a decision, there's going to be no power in the world that will stop it. The moral authority that comes from a group like this is uncontainable within the most evil structures that you can think, because they are already represented. So I keep saying this, and I'm waiting for somebody to convene the circle, and I'm completely happy to facilitate it. Not only am I happy to facilitate it, I'm confident that I can, because I have facilitated enough circles with enough contention about topics to know that it is possible. We'll get more into the specifics of what the processes are when we talk about decision making. But if you have these three mechanisms together, then ultimately every decision can be made in a way that works for just about everyone. That's it in a nutshell.
Thank you.
We did not win the prize, in case anybody was wondering. And I didn't think that we would, because our submission was radical heavy and tech light. And what they were looking for is tech heavy and radical light. So those of us who are feeling passionate about this, just keep talking about it, waiting for the people with the connections and the passion to convene a pilot project, basically. That's that. Simple. I think what is most painful for me is that it's so simple to imagine things working for everyone. It's like really simple. And the thing about capacity is key. One of the things that we are working with is an agreement that under all conditions we believe each other's capacity limits. We never challenge those. And that means that maybe somebody will lie about their capacity, but the fact that they are believed will increase capacity overall in the system. So it's a deep principle of trust.
Thank you. I mean, my sense is that we rounded off.
Is anything?
But my impulse would be to, because there would be so many questions, but my impulse would be just to ask for some witnesses actually, like what has landed with you, just that we get a little bit of a sense of
Yeah.
what's
Instead
in the space.
of questions.
Yeah, and yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't doubt that you could keep going, but it's...
Yeah, I can go for hours.
Yeah.
It demands a lot of energy, but it also gives a lot of energy. It's being in flow. Yeah. So yeah, let's hear from a few people. What's staying with you?
I can say it's great information. I cannot take in so fast all of these things.
Is there any one thing that you took in?
I mean, it was the starting with Gaia, so there's also, I would like to hear more how you, from there you have the feeling you receive it from Gaia, some of this information. So and how is your connection if you're not working with Gaia?
Most of the time I'm not in connection with Gaia. It just comes when it comes. But during that same visit to Chile, I also got a sigh of relief from Gaia that there are those of us who are doing this kind of work, and some very deep affirmation that the work will be supported. And it has been. It's been incredibly hard, but the work has been supported. Yeah.
And if you if you would make a seminar here, I would join. So to have more time to learn about this.
What else? What's one thing that has stayed? Yeah, Dara.
Thank you. I'm really enthusiastic. And I think bringing these 5 systems, that it, like unless you consciously go into them, that you inherit what you know, this really is impactful.
Yeah. Thank you. In the back?
David.
Yeah, what Dara said I thought was also a magic point about we inherit the decision-making capacity.
So let's try to not repeat. So if you have something else that stayed with you, then we have a bouquet.
So the other thing was scarcity at the root of patriarchy. And if I understood you right, the opposite of abundance is enough, not scarcity, which is a...
It's complicated. There is natural abundance. Natural abundance is different from what New Age people call abundance. Natural abundance is about regeneration. It's about regeneration. It's not about more than you need. It's just this relationship of there will keep being more coming if you just stay in humility. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to give thanks for especially the first part on gift economy. I found that really profound. How you say that both accumulation and exchange take us out of flow, and that energetic part that you described, like that gets lost in exchange, where gifting is actually the true answer to answer needs. Like there is something in there that I really appreciate. Thank you for that.
I'm so happy. I'm happy to hear the things that are staying with you, because they are deep things, not like little bits, and that tells me how much the reception is on the channel where the transmission comes from. Yeah. Erin is like so happy she just can't handle it. Her 2 homes are coming together.
Okay, Akiva and then Jörg and then
It stayed with me that actually solutions are simple, and I really felt it within you, that how you deeply believe in it and how deeply you can convey it actually.
I can't actually hear you. Say it.
So the solutions are actually simple, and how much is it within you, this belief or this kind of, I felt it was really transmitted, that you could really believe that as well. And I felt I could really go along with everything you said. It was very fascinating. And I realized I was a lot in my head, and I was really curious also how you integrate the body in your work in general. Maybe not to answer, but just to...
Not my personal strength. Another reason why I can't be the leader. There are other people who have more of that strength. Emma is one of them. Yeah. I think those who have worked with her in the garden will know what I mean. Yes? Okay.
Jörg.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for, in a way, simple thoughts, because the divine is simple. It's not something complicated. And you remind me in this. Thank you. And the flow of the feedback impressed me. Yeah? If there is no flow of the feedback, there is conflict in the air.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And this is one of the dangerous things, is that capitalism specifically closes off feedback loops. So we don't actually know the impact of what we do on purpose, so that we would be able to keep doing it. Yeah. All right.
Good. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Yay! That was so fun.
Have a beautiful evening. And I
Thank
think
you.
most of you, we see each other in a few hours at 6:15 for the celebration of a day of water springs. So have a beautiful night. And Ida,
Yeah, because there was here, if you make a course or something, a seminar in Tamera, you would attend. They are here another 6 weeks around us.
No, we have another 3.5 weeks.
And every Tuesday, some of them come to the garden. And this is also an invitation that you can engage even more in our garden, and by this come in contact with the group that is having some of this knowledge. So it is also advertisement for the garden.
But let's schedule a time about decision making. I think that.
Yes. And I also want to say that whatever time is left between, in this time of conversation between NGL and Tamera, I am absolutely sure that this is just first wave in a more river of contact and relation that will come in the future. So not to step into the scarcity of it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks more left, but we will have more and more contact in the future. And thank you both of you for this amazing, inspiring space.